double-headed axe, the thunderbolt, the lightning, the sword, variously described as lightning, the fire weapon. He also says, though, that men's whip-like implement was a common symbol of lightning, of the lightning flash. I thought that was appropriate. Now, in the Annales du Survey, volume 27 and 28, 1927, Wainwright, in this article, The Aniconic Form of Ammon in the New Kingdom, he says something on 179. He's describing how Min and Re, now Re is the sun god, how Min and Re are very suitable companions for any form of the god Ammon. You have Ammon-Re, there's Ammon-Min, and now you have Min-Re. And of course, he was originally derived from the one, or else absorbed him, and he is sometimes inextricably involved with him, and was later also combined with the other. And on page 181, he says, in fact, the large inscription, which he shows in figure 3, refers only to one god, Ammon-Re Ka-Mut-F, although the scene itself shows the two separate deities. Here then we have their final and complete identification as one and the same God. I think that's remarkable in light of the fact that the Hebraic scholars of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew Old Testament, have shown that El Elyon, the God of the highest God, the most powerful God, is fused with Yahweh, and Yahweh variously takes over the functions of El, and the names are combined. Yahweh El, the Lord God, in the Old Testament, in the Old Testament Hebrew. And of course, Jesus in his great intercessory prayer of John 17, he's praying that I may be one in you, Father, and you as you are in me. And I pray for these, that they may be one in us, as you are in me and I am in you. Let me be in them, let them be in you, so on and so forth. So many personal pronouns used. The intimate connection of the gods with the humans, the combination. And this is shown in facsimile 2, figure 7, with the Min Horus outfit that the seated deity is wearing. He notes on page 189 that finally Horus is the other god who shared with Min and Ammon in the title of Ka-Mut-F. The Ka-Mut-F, Ammon is called Ka-Mut-F, Horus raising his arm. And that's what we have in our figure 7, is Horus with the upraised arm, holding his whip implement. And elsewhere, as Wainwright is elaborating further and further and further on these deities in the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology, December 1963, he's coming up since the 1930s, in his article, The Origin of Storm Gods in Egypt, and he says Min had a derivative, the Ithyphallic Ammon. That's on page 13. Now, a pillar in Egypt represented the air. He's saying this on page 14. A pillar in Egypt represented the air, and elsewhere pillars are known as symbols of sky gods or as supports of the sky. In due time, Min is identified with such storm gods as Resheph and Perseus, as we've seen. Min therefore was or had been one of the storm gods himself, and the connection with fertility is noted on page 15. Fertility, first that of vegetation, hence that of the animals, and so finally of man. And this is due to rainstorms in these hot climates, he notes, of course. But the principle of fertility is also prominent with this Min figure. And fertility of all things, not just humans, but of vegetation, life in general, and Min is associated with that very clearly. Well, in yet another article in the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology from 1933, The Bull Standards of Egypt, Wainwright notes that Yahweh himself had originally been a storm god. This is on page 46, who rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah fire from the Lord out of heaven. He appeared on Mount Sinai in thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud. He answered Elijah by fire on Mount Carmel. He smote the offending captains of 50s for him with fire from heaven. He finally fetched him away to heaven with a chariot of fire in a whirlwind. It's summed up magnificently in Psalm 19, 7-15, and by Ezekiel in his vision, Ezekiel 1, verse 4, and then 26 through 28. Like Adad, Yahweh also had a calf, for Aaron instituted the worship of his golden calf by proclaiming, "Tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh." This is Exodus 32, 5. Similarly, Psalm 106, verses 19 and 20, explains the episode. Thus they changed their glory into the similitude of an ox that eateth grass. Later on, when Jeroboam wanted to keep the people from going up to Jerusalem, he substituted the worship of 2 calves for that at the temple. 1 Kings 12:28 following. Later again, Jehu continued the worship of these golden calves, though he stamped out the false gods and their cult by slaughtering all the worshippers of Baal, destroying his images, of course, and laying waste his temples, at 2 Kings 10:25-29. Well, the word used in the Old Testament is egel, which means not only a young bull, but also a calf, just as it is translated. And in Arabic today, the word retains both of these meanings. Well, there's probably some sort of difference between the hornless calf and the full-grown bull, but the idea is they are associated with the bull and the heavenly expanse and the storm and the lightning and the wind and the fire and the pure power of the cosmos itself. Again, the connection between the cultures, he points this out in numerous. The shooting stars and meteorites are equated as the weapons of such gods, especially those of the Leonids and the Perseids. The meteorite, the showers, star showers, gave rise to the idea of war in high heaven. There was a war in heaven. He says this on page 47 of the Bull Standards of Egypt. The local god Onurus was called the Good Warrior and the Lord of the Lance. His temple was the house of the lance of Horus. His sacred boat was considered his warship. See the equivalence of shooting stars and weapons falls in with other countries in the ancient Near East. Interesting, Yahweh is a man of war. He is described as such. He is the Lord. He is also described as a warrior. On page 48, Wainwright's noting that all around about Egypt, the mountain was symbolic of the sky or the storm god, just as was the bull, and he shows many Old Testament passages. Jeremiah and Isaiah, they say, "Truly in vain is salvation hoped for from the hills and from the multitudes of mountains. It is a day of trouble and of a crying to the mountains," according to Isaiah 22:5. The Syrians said of the Hebrews, "Their gods are gods of the hills," 1 Kings 20:23. And much else might be added in this same strain. So that's basically an analysis of darn near a dozen of G.A. Wainwright's Egyptological articles concerning this figure of Min, Ammon, and how it is related culturally with other areas.
So what I am showing here is the interrelationships of various cultural icons, their powers, their symbols, their functions, their religious meanings, their political aspirations, and so on and so forth. So, thank you for joining me in this Backyard Professor podcast series. It's a joy for me to produce these for you. I'll see you next time on the podcasts. Have a great life.